smartphone. You use it to call or text, GPS, Snapchat, Tinder, whatever.
The X-Files became a cultural phenomenon, captivating audiences with its mix of science fiction, mystery, and conspiracy. But as the series grew in popularity, fans were shocked when some of its biggest stars suddenly left the show. For years, the real reasons were hidden behind studio statements and rumors. Now, the truth about why these actors walked away from The X-Files is finally being revealed, and it's more complicated than anyone expected. To understand why anyone would walk away from a cultural phenomenon, you first have to understand what that phenomenon was. In the 1990s, television was a different landscape. There was no streaming, no binge-watching, no entire season dropping at once. There was appointment television. It was a ritual. And on Friday nights, for millions of people, that ritual was watching The X-Files. It wasn't just a show, it was a conversation starter, a source of new slang, a weekly dose of paranoia and possibility that seeped into the very fabric of the decade. The tagline, "The truth is out there," wasn't just marketing. It was a mission statement for a generation growing skeptical of official narratives. At the heart of this whirlwind were two people: Fox Mulder, the believer, the brilliant FBI agent driven by the childhood trauma of his sister's apparent alien abduction, and Dana Scully, the scientist, the doctor, the skeptic sent to debunk his work, only to find herself on a journey that would challenge the very foundations of her scientific principles. The chemistry between David Duchovny as Mulder and Gillian Anderson as Scully is the kind of lightning in a bottle that executives and casting directors dream of. It was more than romantic tension. It was an intellectual, spiritual, and emotional partnership that felt profoundly real. He was the faith, she was the reason, and together they created a perfect, compelling whole. The show exploded. It moved from a cult hit to a mainstream juggernaut. Posters of Mulder and Scully adorned bedroom walls, classrooms, and office cubicles. The series pulled in staggering ratings, won armfuls of awards, and made its two leads into global superstars. They were on the cover of every magazine. Their faces were instantly recognizable from New York to New Zealand. They were at the absolute zenith of television stardom. Which begs the central, burning question: why would David Duchovny, the very soul of the show, walk away from it all at the height of its power? And why would Gillian Anderson, after carrying the torch, eventually decide her time was also up for good? The easy answers, the ones that circulated in magazines and early internet forums, were simple. He wanted a movie career. He was tired of the character. She wanted to do other things. And while there's a kernel of truth in those explanations, they are just the surface layer. They are the polite, press release-friendly versions of a story that is far more complex. A story rooted in money, exhaustion, creative friction, and the sheer, grinding reality of making 20-plus episodes of television a year after year. The real reasons are a mix of Hollywood business practices, legal battles, and the deeply human desire for an artist not to be consumed by their own creation. To find the real truth, you don't need to look for UFOs, you just need to follow the money and the paper trail. Let's start with the big one, the departure that fundamentally changed the series forever: David Duchovny. For 7 seasons, he was Fox Mulder. The character was synonymous with him. Mulder's dry, sarcastic wit was Duchovny's wit. His laid-back intellectualism felt like an extension of the actor himself, a Princeton and Yale-educated man who stumbled into acting. For many, The X-Files without Mulder was unimaginable. It would be like Star Trek without a captain, or a detective story without the detective. Yet, after season 7, that's largely what happened. He appeared in the season finale, was abducted by aliens, and then for the entirety of season 8, he was mostly gone, appearing in only a handful of episodes. He returned for the season 8 finale, then disappeared again until the final episode of the original series in season 9. What happened? The story officially began to crack around the show's 5th season. By this point, The X-Files was a well-oiled machine, but it was also a grueling one. The show was filmed in Vancouver, Canada, a city chosen for its moody, atmospheric forests that could stand in for just about any mysterious location in America. While beautiful, it was also far from Los Angeles, the heart of the film industry and, importantly, where David Duchovny's personal life and career aspirations were centered. He had married actress Téa Leoni, and the commute and long-term separation were becoming a major strain. He was also looking toward the future. Television in the 90s, even for a massive star, was still often seen as a stepping stone to a real movie career. Duchovny had the fame, the looks, and the talent. It was a logical next step. So, he began to push for a change. He leveraged his indispensable status to get the show's production moved from Vancouver to Los Angeles, starting with season 6. This was a monumental undertaking. It meant moving the entire production, finding new crews, new locations, and fundamentally altering the visual feel of the show. The damp, dark, mysterious forests of British Columbia were replaced by the bright, dusty, sun-bleached landscapes of Southern California. Fans noticed the difference immediately. The show felt brighter, less ominous. While the quality of the script is debatable, there's no question that the core atmosphere that defined the early seasons was a casualty of this move. But it was a concession the studio, 20th Century Fox, was willing to make to keep its star happy. They had just released the first feature film, The X-Files: Fight the Future, in the summer of 1998 between seasons 5 and 6. It was a global box office success, proving the franchise had legs beyond the small screen. Keeping Duchovny on board was paramount. But keeping him happy was about more than just location. It was about money. And this is where the polite narrative of wanting a movie career collides with the harsh reality of a massive lawsuit. In 1999, David Duchovny filed a lawsuit against 20th Century Fox that sent shockwaves through the industry. This wasn't just a simple contract renegotiation. This was a bombshell accusation of, to put it bluntly, being cheated out of millions of dollars. To understand the lawsuit, you have to understand a concept called syndication. When a show airs for the first time on a network like Fox, that's its first run. The real, long-term money, the kind of money that turns television actors into moguls, comes from selling the reruns. This is syndication. The studio that owns the show, in this case 20th Century Fox Television, sells the rights to air these reruns to other channels, both in the US and internationally. These deals are worth hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars. As the undisputed star of a global hit, Duchovny's contract entitled him to a significant percentage of these profits. It's a standard part of any major television star's deal. It's called back-end or profit participation. The core of Duchovny's lawsuit alleged that Fox had engaged in a practice known as sweetheart dealing. The studio had sold the valuable X-Files syndication rights to its own affiliates, primarily the cable channel FX, which was also owned by Fox's parent company. The lawsuit claimed that the studio sold the show to its sister company for a deliberately and artificially low price. Why would they do that? Because it keeps the money within the same corporate family. But by selling the rights for less than they were worth on the open market, they were shrinking the total profit pool. And if the profit pool is smaller, the percentage that David Duchovny was owed from that pool also becomes smaller. He was accusing his own studio of underselling its own hit show to another part of its own company, specifically to avoid paying him the full share he was contractually owed. Furthermore, the lawsuit alleged that the show's creator, Chris Carter, had been paid a significant sum of money, what some might call hush money, to ensure his silence and cooperation with this arrangement. This allegation, whether true or not, added a layer of personal betrayal to the financial dispute. It suggested a breakdown in the relationship not just with the studio, but potentially with the creative mind behind the entire enterprise. This was not a minor disagreement. It was a direct accusation of corporate malfeasance. For Duchovny, this wasn't just about greed. He was already a wealthy man. It was about the principle. He had dedicated years of his life, his health, and his creative energy to building this franchise into a global money-making machine for Fox. The lawsuit was his way of saying, "You will not undervalue my contribution. You will honor the deal we made." It's a power move, and a risky one. Suing your own employer is a dangerous game in Hollywood. It can get you labeled as difficult, and it can burn bridges that are impossible to rebuild. The lawsuit dragged on, creating a toxic atmosphere behind the scenes. Imagine going to work every day on a set where you are actively in a legal battle with the people signing your paychecks. The trust is gone. The collaborative spirit is shattered. By season 7, it was clear that Duchovny's time on the show, at least as a full-time participant, was coming to an end. The lawsuit was eventually settled out of court for a very substantial, albeit undisclosed, sum, rumored to be in the neighborhood of $20 million. Part of that settlement likely included an agreement for him to return for a limited number of episodes to properly wrap up his storyline, or at least transition the show into a new phase. So, when people say he left to pursue a movie career, they're not wrong. He absolutely did want that. He starred in films like Evolution, Return to Me, and Full Frontal. But the desire for a film career was the convenient, public-facing reason. It was the catalyst, perhaps. But the massive, trust-shattering lawsuit over syndication profits was the engine that drove him out the door. It was the point of no return. The burnout from the grueling schedule and the desire for new creative challenges were real factors, but the financial dispute was the event that made his departure an inevitability. The abduction of Fox Mulder at the end of season 7 wasn't just a shocking plot twist. It was the creative solution to a massive, real-world business problem. It was how you write out a character whose actor is embroiled in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit with the studio but has agreed to come back part-time. The truth wasn't out there, it was in the court filings. Now, we turn to the other side of the coin, the unwavering constant in the X-Files universe, Gillian Anderson's Dana Scully. If Mulder was the show's soul, Scully was its heart and its brilliant mind. For 7 seasons, she was the anchor, the grounding force that made the unbelievable feel plausible. When Duchovny left, the entire weight of this global franchise fell squarely on her shoulders. She became the de facto lead of the show for seasons 8 and 9. But her journey was also fraught with its own struggles, and she came close to leaving herself on more than one occasion before finally closing the book on the character decades later. Her story begins with a fight, not to leave, but to be recognized as an equal. When The X-Files started, David Duchovny was arguably the bigger name, having had a few noticeable film and TV roles, including a memorable run on Twin Peaks. Gillian Anderson was a relative newcomer, a theater actress with few screen credits. As a result, there was a significant disparity from the very beginning. For the first few seasons, she was reportedly paid substantially less than her male co-star. This wasn't just about salary, it was reflected in everything. In early promotional materials, she was often positioned slightly behind Duchovny. On set, she was initially instructed to stand a few feet behind him in their scenes together, a subtle visual cue that he was the lead and she was the subordinate. Anderson, however, was not one to quietly accept a secondary role. She knew Scully was as integral to the show's success as Mulder. The dynamic only worked because they were a partnership of equals. She fought back. She fought for equal pay, and it took her years to achieve it. She fought for equal positioning on screen and in posters. By the time the show was a certified hit, she had won those battles, establishing herself not just as a co-lead, an equal partner whose contribution was non-negotiable. This early struggle is crucial to understanding her character and her later decisions. It shows a deep-seated belief in her own value and a willingness to fight for it, a trait that would define her career. When Duchovny's role was drastically reduced after season 7, the creative burden shifted to Anderson. The show had to be retooled around Scully. This led to the introduction of a new partner, John Doggett, played by Robert Patrick. Scully, the lifelong skeptic, was now put in the position of being the believer, having seen too much to deny the paranormal. She was now the one trying to convince her new, stoic, skeptical partner. It was a fascinating role reversal, and Anderson handled the transition with incredible grace and skill. She also had to incorporate a pregnancy into her storyline. Her own real-life pregnancy had been hidden during season 2, but for season 8, Scully's mysterious pregnancy and the birth of her superpowered baby William became the central mythological arc. But carrying a show like this is an immense pressure. The hours were just as long, the work just as grueling, and while she now had the top billing she had long deserved, the show felt different. The magic of the Mulder-Scully dynamic was gone, replaced by something new. It was good, but it wasn't the same. By the end of season 9, everyone, including Anderson, felt the show had run its course. The ratings had declined from their peak, and there was a sense of creative exhaustion. When the original series ended in 2002, Anderson was ready to hang up Scully's badge and pantsuit for good. She wanted to return to theatre, to explore independent film, and to live in London, far away from the Hollywood machine. She had given a decade of her life to Dana Scully, and it was time to move on. For 6 years, she did just that. She built a prestigious career in British film and stage productions, earning acclaim for her roles in adaptations like Bleak House and The House of Mirth. She proved unequivocally that she was more than just Dana Scully, but the pull of The X-Files was strong. In 2008, she agreed to return for a second feature film, The X-Files: I Want to Believe. This was a smaller, standalone thriller, a departure from the alien mythology. It was a chance to revisit the characters without the commitment of a full television season. The film was, however, a critical and commercial disappointment. It seemed to confirm that perhaps the time for The X-Files had truly passed. And then, in 2016, the unthinkable happened. In an era of reboots and revivals, Fox brought The X-Files back for a limited 10th season. Both Duchovny and Anderson agreed to return. For fans, it was a dream come true, but Anderson's decision to return was not made lightly. She was once again, initially, offered only half the pay of her male co-star. More than 2 decades after the show first aired, after she had carried the series on her own, after winning countless awards for her work, she was still having to fight the same battle for equal pay. She spoke about it publicly, expressing her shock and disappointment. The network quickly rectified the offer, but the fact that it was made at all speaks volumes about the systemic issues she had been battling her entire career. She returned for season 10 and then again for season 11 in 2018. But during the promotion for the 11th season, she made her position crystal clear. This was it. This was the absolute final time she would play Dana Scully. There would be no more movies, no more revivals. She was done. Her reasons were simple and direct. She felt that the character's story had been told. She was an artist who wanted to pursue other challenges. She had just come off an incredible award-winning run on the series The Fall and had other projects lined up, like her memorable turn in Sex Education. She was 50 years old and had been playing this one character, on and off, since she was 24. It was simply time to close that chapter of her life. This time, on her own terms, with no ambiguity. So, while David Duchovny's departure was precipitated by a dramatic, high-stakes legal battle, Gillian Anderson's final departure was a quieter, more deliberate artistic choice. It was the culmination of a long career, spent both embracing and trying to move beyond a role that defined her. She had fought for equality, carried the show on her back, returned to please the fans, and finally decided that her journey with Dana Scully was complete. There was no lawsuit, no public feud. It was simply an artist saying, "Thank you," and goodbye. Of course, Mulder and Scully were not the only people in this universe. Their departures and near departures had ripple effects that created other significant cast changes. When David Duchovny left, the show needed a new male lead. The task of replacing one of the most popular television characters of all time fell to Robert Patrick, an actor best known for his iconic, chilling performance as the T-1000 in Terminator 2, Judgment Day. He was cast as John Doggett, a former Marine and police detective who was assigned to the X-Files, initially to find the missing Fox Mulder. Robert Patrick faced an impossible task. He wasn't just joining a show, he was stepping into a void left by a beloved star. The fan reaction was, predictably, divided. Many viewers were hostile to the very idea of a replacement, no matter how good the actor was. They saw him as an interloper, a disruption to the sacred Mulder-Scully dynamic. But Patrick, to his immense credit, never tried to be the new Mulder. Doggett was his own character, a grounded, no-nonsense brick agent who was an even deeper skeptic than Scully had ever been. He was a blue-collar professional, a stark contrast to Mulder's quirky academic approach. He brought a different kind of energy to the show, and over time, many fans and critics came to respect his performance and the character. He and Gillian Anderson developed their own unique chemistry, a partnership based on professional respect and a slow-building trust. Alongside him, the show introduced another new agent, Monica Reyes, played by Annabeth Gish. Reyes was Doggett's longtime friend and partner, a spiritual and open-minded believer who effectively filled the believer role that Mulder had vacated, and Scully was now more cautiously embracing. The team of Scully, Doggett, and Reyes became the new face of The X-Files for its final 2 seasons. But after the original series ended in 2002, both Doggett and Reyes largely vanished from the X-Files universe. Neither appeared in the 2008 film I Want to Believe. Robert Patrick's absence was primarily a matter of scheduling and creative choice. By 2008, he was starring in another successful series, The Unit. Getting the scheduling to work for a supporting role would have been difficult. More importantly, Chris Carter wanted the film to be a focused, back-to-basics story centered squarely on Mulder and Scully, reconnecting with the core relationship that fans missed the most. Including Doggett would have complicated that stripped-down narrative. When the show was revived in 2016, fans wondered if Doggett and Reyes would return. Robert Patrick was again unavailable and expressed that he felt his time on the show was complete. He was proud of his work but had moved on. Annabeth Gish, however, did return as Monica Reyes for a few episodes in seasons 10 and 11, but her character's return was met with widespread controversy and disappointment from fans. In a shocking twist, it was revealed that Reyes had, in the intervening years, made a deal with the show's main antagonist, the cigarette-smoking man, becoming his subordinate in exchange for being spared from the apocalyptic plague he was planning. For many viewers, this felt like a betrayal of her character, who had always been a moral and empathetic figure. It was a creative choice that proved deeply unpopular and soured the legacy of a character who had been an important part of the show's later years. In this case, the actors didn't leave the show. It felt more like the show's later writing left the characters behind, abandoning what made them compelling in the first place. And then there were the Lone Gunmen, Byers, Frohike, and Langley. The trio of paranoid, conspiracy-theorizing hackers were breakout supporting characters from the very beginning. They were Mulder's trusted allies in the shadows, the ones he went to for technical help, off-the-books research, and a healthy dose of anti-government rhetoric. They were so popular that in 2001, they were given their own spin-off series. This represents another kind of departure, leaving the mothership for your own vehicle. The Lone Gunmen series was a lighter, more comedic take on the conspiracy world. It was a quirky show that, in a chillingly prescient pilot episode, depicted a plot by a rogue government faction to fly a remote-controlled commercial airliner into the World Trade Center, only to be foiled by the heroes at the last minute. The episode aired in March of 2001, just 6 months before the 9/11 attacks. Despite this eerie coincidence and a dedicated cult following, the show's ratings were low, and it was cancelled after just 13 episodes. The actors Bruce Harwood, Tom Braidwood, and Dean Haglund returned to The X-Files to wrap up their storyline. And this is where their departure becomes permanent and controversial. In the Season 9 episode, Jump the Shark, named after the slang term for when a show has passed its creative peak, the Lone Gunmen sacrificed their lives to stop a bioterrorist threat. They trap themselves in a hallway with a man about to release a deadly plague, and the doors seal, containing the threat but ensuring their deaths. For fans, it was a gut punch. These beloved, often comedic characters were given a heroic but tragic end. Many felt it was an unnecessarily cruel way to write them out, a final nail in the coffin of their failed spin-off. The decision to kill them off was a creative one, made by the writers to provide a definitive and impactful conclusion to their story. While the actors didn't leave in the sense of a dispute, their characters were permanently removed from the board, a departure that still stings for many longtime fans. Though they did reappear in a dream sequence in the revival, their official story ended in that sealed corridor. Finally, you cannot talk about why actors left The X-Files without talking about the man who was there from the beginning to the end, the creator, Chris Carter. While not an actor, his decisions, his creative vision, and his management of the franchise were the landscape upon which all of these departures played out. Carter was the showrunner, the chief writer, and the executive producer. The X-Files was his baby. For 9 seasons, 2 movies, and 2 revival seasons, he was the ultimate authority. The pressure on a showrunner for a show of this magnitude is unimaginable. You are a writer, a manager, a producer, a creative visionary, and a diplomat, all at once. Carter had to navigate the demands of the network, the expectations of a massive global fanbase, and the needs and desires of his highly famous, highly paid actors. When David Duchovny wanted to move the show to Los Angeles, Carter had to make it happen. When the lawsuit was filed, he was caught in the middle between his star and his studio. When Duchovny left, he had to figure out how to continue the show without its central character, a task that would have sunk most other series. Many critics and fans feel that Carter's tight creative control was both the show's greatest strength and, in its later years, its greatest weakness. In the beginning, his singular vision gave The X-Files its unique, cohesive, and compelling identity. He crafted a complex and intricate mythology that captivated viewers for years. But as the show went on, some felt that this mythology became convoluted, tangled in its own threads, with promised answers never quite materializing. The final seasons of the original run, and especially the revival seasons, were criticized by many for plotlines that seemed to contradict established canon or for retconning major events, like the nature of Scully's son, William. This creative direction undoubtedly played a role in the actors' feelings about the show. When an actor starts to feel that the material isn't as strong as it once was, or that their character's journey is meandering, the motivation to endure the grueling 16-hour workdays begins to wane. David Duchovny had expressed creative frustrations, feeling that there were only so many times Mulder could chase aliens and be thwarted without a real resolution. Gillian Anderson's final departure was very much tied to a feeling that Scully's story had been told, and that the new storylines of the revival weren't offering a compelling enough reason to continue. In the end, the story of why actors left The X-Files is not one story, but many. It's a tapestry woven from different threads. There is the thread of money and business, exemplified by David Duchovny's landmark lawsuit, a clear case of an artist fighting for his financial due in the face of complex Hollywood accounting. There is the thread of personal and professional exhaustion, the sheer human toll that a decade of television production takes on a person, which affected everyone but particularly Gillian Anderson as she carried the show's final years. There is the thread of artistic integrity, the desire of a performer to not be defined by a single role forever, to seek out new challenges and tell new stories, a core reason for Anderson's ultimate, final farewell. And there is the thread of creative evolution, or perhaps creative decay, as the central vision that made the show great struggled to maintain its quality and coherence over more than 200 episodes and multiple decades, influencing how the actors felt about the work they were doing. The X-Files was a product of a specific time, a pre-internet saturation era where water-cooler conversations fueled the show's success. Its departures were seismic events for its audience because these characters felt like part of our lives. The reasons behind those departures are a perfect case study in the realities of television production. They strip away the glamour and show the machinery beneath, the contracts, the lawsuits, the egos, the exhaustion, and the relentless pressure to keep a massively profitable enterprise running. Even after its heart has been ripped out, the truth, as it turns out, wasn't in some classified government file. It was in the legal documents, the trade paper headlines, and the frank, tired admissions of the very people who had once convinced us all to look to the skies. The departures from The X-Files weren't just about contracts or career moves, they were about personal struggles, creative clashes, and the intense pressure of carrying a groundbreaking show. Behind the paranormal storylines were real-life challenges that shaped the fate of the series. And now, fans can finally understand why some of their favorite stars chose to step away.